Today we will be talking about excelling with a hybrid or remote work schedule. This workshop is a part of the hybrid and remote work series. My name is Azetta Beatty. I'm the HR manager in the Office of Work Life at the University of Kentucky. So we're going to start off simply by thinking, who knows you best? Who knows me best? When you think about that, our goal here really is to pause and reflect a little bit on what your personal work strategies are, your personal work schedule, your department, the resources that are available to you, your team, the services that you provide. When you start to think about things that you can do to excel with the remote and hybrid work schedule, no one knows better than you what you need. So I do encourage you as you go through this presentation to think about what do you need personally based on your day-to-day task and responsibilities, your team needs, and so forth. So when I think about this pie chart that shows all of these different tasks with equal amount of time, we can all say that that is not realistic, not at all. In fact, you may want to chuckle when you look at that. But this is just reminding us that when we're talking about excelling in our remote and hybrid schedule and managing our work and life responsibilities, nothing is ever equal. There are times when you have a project that may require a little more time than others. There are days when you may need to adjust your schedule to meet the demands of a project that you're working on. In all of our lives, there's no such thing as everything getting equal amounts of our time. But that does not mean that you can't be successful in your schedule and in your life and in the things that you have to do. This statement says managing your schedule and setting boundaries will vary based on the type of flex work. So managing your schedule and setting boundaries will vary based on the type of flex work. So the one way to think about this is depending on the type of flex work that you have, you may have to set different types of boundaries. So for example, if you're working 100% remote, you may have to set some boundaries on what time you start and end your workday. When you oftentimes are working remotely, sometimes you may find yourself working additional hours or time because you don't have travel time, you don't have packing time, you don't have traffic time. And so sometimes it's easier to start early and to be so engrossed in your work that you don't stop when you should. Also, when you think about your hybrid schedule, if you are working from home, for example, 3 days a week and working from in the office 2 days a week, as an example, you may find that you need to really be very intentional on the days that you have to go into your workspace, your on-site space, because it's so much easier to just walk down the hall and start working and not have to have all that extra prep time that it requires to leave, as an example. Also, when you think about managing your work and life responsibilities, especially when it comes to your hybrid and your work schedule, your remote schedule, you really have to think about the importance of having a designated workspace. If you don't have a designated workspace, you may find that it can mess with your concentration. It can also hinder you from being as effective as you want to be, or even as comfortable as you want to be. So having a designated workspace is very helpful. So how is your work schedule working for you right now? That's a question you can ask yourself. How is my work schedule working for me right now? And we say right now intentionally, because 6 months ago, it may have been working one way. 3 months ago, it may have been working a different way. And presently, it may be working in a completely different way. So you want to ask yourself as you think about how do I make the most of and be most effective with my hybrid and remote schedule? What's working for me? What do I enjoy about my schedule? For example, you may enjoy if you are hybrid and you're working some remote days, you may enjoy the fact that you don't have to get up quite as early, or you may enjoy that you can really pretty much start on your journey to work 5 minutes before you need to be there, versus if you are commuting in, it may be easily 30 minutes or more. So that's just something it's okay to say you enjoy certain things about your schedule. Also, while you're thinking about things you enjoy, maybe you enjoy more time if you have family, friends, or pets, something, maybe you like to go for walks and you have a little extra time, you can walk on your breaks, for example. So there's lots of things that you might be enjoying about your schedule. You may really enjoy um, communicating via Zoom or MS Teams or some sort of a platform like that, and seeing people on a screen. That may be great for you. And what's not working, again, you have to think for yourself, what is not working? And sometimes it's good to say, what's the first thing that comes to my mind? And you may find that what's working may be internal to you, maybe some things you need to change, and it could be external. It could be some things that need to change around you, or you need to have some conversations with some people about some challenges that you're facing. But it's good to pause and think what's not working, and be okay with if some of the things that surface are things that you need to do and not necessarily anyone else. And along the same lines there, think about your pros and cons. Pros and cons to working a hybrid and a remote schedule. That's going to look different for everyone. So let's think about it. What do you need for your schedule to work? What is missing, if anything? Maybe it's working just fine. Maybe nothing's missing, everything's working great, and that's wonderful. If you do need some resources, what is that? What support or tools do you need? Who needs to help you? Is this a supervisor? Is it a peer or a colleague or a partner, someone in a home with you? Who needs to help you? Who needs to know you need help? Again, if there's things going on with you that's impacting your work, it may be necessary to talk to your supervisor about some of these things so that you can get some assistance or support, or some flexibility if need be. So this little quote reminds us that everything you need is already inside you. Don't wait for others to light your fire. You have your own matches. I really like this quote. It just reminds us that we can do what we need to do to make sure that our schedule is working for us. So if you are miserable with your schedule, you have the ability to have a conversation with your leadership or your supervisor and ask questions about making adjustments to your schedule if that's what you need. Also, a quick reminder that sleep is our friend. Adequate sleep really can make the difference between you being your best self when you show up to work, whether that be remote work or hybrid on-site work, or you just dragging yourself through the day. So just keep in mind the importance of sleep. So managing your flex work schedule. Let's talk about this for a little bit. So there's a few things to think about when you are managing your schedule effectively and you're saying to yourself, I really want this to work. I really want to do a great job. I want to be effective in my hybrid schedule and my remote schedule. So first of all, definitely maintain a consistent routine, because consistency really helps you to be productive as best you can. Also consider, if you are working your routine, are there some things that are distractions? Are there disruptions? Are there things that you need to do to make sure you have a good workflow? So basically create a consistent routine and a workable schedule. Make sure everyone knows your schedule. That's really important. By everyone, that could be your colleagues, your peers, people that you collaborate with across campus or across the university in different capacities. Make sure everyone knows your schedule that needs to know your schedule. Some departments will share calendars, and that way, if people have different schedules, you can just check someone's schedule to see if they are in the office that day or out of the office that day, or on site or off site that day. Also, using your calendar could be your best friend. You can put notes on your calendar if you share calendars with colleagues, or at least if you have an assistant or someone, an associate, someone that can see calendars, that can make others aware that this person is available or not available. And then also consider your capacity and prioritize. Think about what you have the capacity to do in one given day, for example. Think about also, let's say you are commuting and you driving in and you can't work extra, you can't work later than 30 minutes later, for example, or you have to stop on time. Especially if you are an hourly employee, it's very important that you maintain your schedule. So think about what is appropriate and what is realistic to get done in a particular day. You can't do everything in one day. Sometimes you can be ambitious and make a to-do list that's 15 items long. And if there's short, quick items and you don't get interrupted or no distractions, you might actually get through them. But oftentimes you'll find that you can't get to everything on your schedule for that day. So it's important to take a quick look at those items and determine what has to be done today. Absolutely today, or what has to be done over the next couple of days, and make sure those things are at the top of the list. Also consider how your schedule will impact your team, very important, and also how it's going to impact your processes and your projects and your procedures. So managing your tasks and your projects and expectations of others in terms of what you can do and when you will be available in person or on site is important as well. So as always, you always have to determine what is the best way to communicate and collaborate. That's one of the big ones, right? We all want to know what's a good way to communicate with our colleagues, with our manager. Our managers want to know what's a good way to communicate with their team members in a way that's not disruptive, but helpful. So that's just worth having a conversation to talk about what resources and what tools are we going to use to communicate with one another, whether it be sharing our calendar or having a weekly check-in or check-in bi-weekly or what have you. Emailing as necessary. There's lots of ways to communicate. And then to be accountable and follow up. Being accountable is all of our responsibility. If you say you're going to do something, make sure you do it. If something came up and you can't do it, then communicate that you're going to need to delay your project or delay a request. So that's just something to keep in mind. Quality over quantity, really important. Quality, you just want to make sure whatever you produce, whatever work you do, and whoever you're serving feels served, feels heard, feels listened to, and not cram so much in your day to where you're rushing through things and you're not being as effective as you want to be. And then, of course, creating and maintaining healthy boundaries, critical. We all need boundaries when it comes to work and our lives. So that is going to look different for different people. And you just want to think about what you need and what's helpful to you and communicate that to the people that you work with. And then also try to avoid the comparison trap and try to avoid burnout. You may say, I don't know when I'm burned out. How do I know if I'm burned out? There are some wonderful resources and tools on the Work Life website, and you can talk to a work life therapist to talk a little bit about burnout and what that means. What are the signs? Because sometimes we find that we talk to people and they are tired and they're disconnected and they're, struggling and they don't realize it's burnout. And so it's good to have a conversation or just do some self-reflection to see what's happening with you. And then avoid the comparison trap. That is where you are maybe looking at someone else's schedule or looking at their projects or looking at what they've gotten done this week and you're comparing and wish you'd done that. Or you can say, they're working 100% remote and I'm working on site 2 days a week. Why is that? Don't fall into the comparison trap as best you can. Try to just do what works best for you for your schedule. So of course, when you think about hybrid work and remote work, there's always the possibility of having some challenges and some benefits. So some potential challenges, these are potential. They may not be a challenge for you, or you may find that one or two items is really a challenge for you. Sometimes when we can identify our challenges, then we can start to make some steps to some solutions. So one is loneliness. Another is missing casual interactions. Another could be challenges with communicating or collaborating. We don't see that quite as much because we have such great tools such as Zoom and Teams and Messenger types of options that we don't see that quite as much, but it still can happen. Also, some of that might depend on your personality and how you prefer to work. If you prefer to work in person and you're working a 100% remote schedule, you may find these tools not as effective for you because it's not your preferred way to work. So that's also something to consider when you're thinking about communication and collaboration. What tools make sense for you, not only with your work, but with your communication style and with your personality preferences. Also, challenges could be distractions, could be people, could be animals, could be just you are distracted yourself by the things that's in your environment. So think about challenges, distractions could be it. And reliable Wi-Fi, you must have really good internet if you're working remotely and particularly. So making sure that you have some backup options to your Wi-Fi. If your home Wi-Fi goes out, make sure you have some options that you can still tap into. Ergonomics, that's just a great something to consider when you think about how you sit at your desk and the type of equipment you have and the height of the desk and chair and so forth. There's some wonderful resources on our websites about that as well, and particularly the Work Anywhere website. And then staying motivated. You may find if you're the type of person that's really motivated by being around other people, if you're working alone at home, you may find that that's not quite as motivating. So it's okay to take a few minutes and call someone and talk to them for 5 minutes, or text with someone and do a quick text. There's different ways. You have to really think of some creative ways to motivate yourself. Printing, if you are working remotely 100% and don't have a printer at home, printing may not be something you can do easily if you need to print items, but that's something you can work through. You might forget resources. If you're working a hybrid schedule and you're going in on site certain days and home certain days, it is very possible that you might leave something you need, a notebook or a resource or a book or a handout or a presentation. You might leave something one place or the other. So one way to kind of work on that when it comes to resources, that's files, is just make sure you put your files in a space where you can access it both places. So that's good when it comes to files. When it comes to just resources or supplies that you need, if possible, have a set of supplies in both locations, at least minimum supplies. So there are some different ways that you can work around that. Working past quitting time, we find that a lot of people say when they work remotely that they work past the time they should stop working. So that may be just something for you to, your last hour of the day, make that be your hour where you're looking at what have I done today? Are there a few things that I can wrap up? And let's go ahead and make my list for things to do the next day. That might be one way to help you feel like you can transition. So of course, there are some benefits, as always, wonderfully. There are some benefits when it comes to working a hybrid schedule. One benefit, of course, is potentially more time with family, friends, or just by yourself. If you're the type of person that really likes alone time, or you just like meditating or just doing some different things that you don't really require other people quite as much, you may really enjoy that quiet time or that peaceful time. I mean, then also less stress and anxiety potentially. Sometimes the simple added stress of just commuting to work, that could be alleviated. Travel time, eating out, dry cleaning, gas for your vehicle, mileage on your vehicle. Those are benefits for having a remote schedule or a hybrid schedule. Of course, more sleep on those days. If you're hybrid where you're working at home, you may be able to sleep a little longer if you want to. And because you don't have the commute time, you don't have the travel time. Less distractions, that's a possible benefit also. So if you are a supervisor, here's a few quick tips for supervisors to consider as you are working with someone that has a remote or hybrid schedule. For one, you want to discuss reasons to come on site in advance as much as possible. So if a person's working remotely 100% or a hybrid, when you're scheduling different meetings and they're on site, you want to give them as much notice as possible so that they can plan accordingly to be on site. And you also want to make sure that they have all the equipment and documentations that they need. Then also make sure the employee has the technical skills, equipment, and access to be productive. You want to determine team communication and project management tools in advance, and you want to make adjustments as needed. You want to discuss the importance of good time management, project management, and communication. You may not need to discuss this quite as much. It may depend on the person that you're working with. Some people may have some really good time management skills and project management skills where they don't need any extra suggestions or support, but you can just monitor and see how that goes and see who may need some extra assistance. And there's lots of wonderful trainings that's offered by the HR training and development team to assist with that as well. And then also discuss on-site workspace location, setups, maintenance. That's of course something you would talk about in advance. And if that changes for some reason, then you can talk to the person in advance with some notice that there needs to be a change to their shared office space or their office space. Also, of course, when you are managing a team that's remote and hybrid, or one or the other, or both, or a combination of people on site full time, you also want to think about including everyone in conversations about projects and meetings and team building activities and different decisions that impact them. Also, make sure the hybrid or remote worker has enough notice when meetings are moved to on-site location. Make sure employees know the hybrid or the remote work is not a substitute for childcare or elder care. I'm sure you'll have those conversations at the beginning, but you just want to remind them, if necessary, that that is not the option. That is not a part of their agreement to work hybrid or remote schedules. Make sure everyone knows the entire team's work schedule or arrangement. Regularly check on the individual's morale and workload stress. Really important. Morale is a big deal when you talk about changes, when you're talking about adjustments, sometimes last minute changes. So check in individually and check in as a group to see how things are going. Also, just really be mindful that whatever, depending on what your team is working on and dealing with, individuals and a collective, that there may be some burnout. And let's just say they can't take time off from this particular project or whatever they're working on. You may think of some other creative things that you can do to try to boost morale. And also, as a supervisor, you get to set good examples. You get to set an example about managing your work time and managing schedules and not burning out, and saying no and being okay with saying no to things sometimes when possible. And a no is not necessarily a no, I can't do it. It may be I can't do it right now, and negotiate a different time for a project or a deadline. And then, of course, you always, as a supervisor, have to be evaluating how things are going and make adjustments as needed. And then, of course, celebrate successes. Now, there are some proactive solutions. You can monitor projects and bandwidth. You can stay connected in a variety of ways. You can maintain self-care because it's very necessary. When it talks about maintaining your self-care, don't encourage your teammates not to brush off fears. And for yourself, don't brush off fears and worry. If you're worried about something, you may need to take a moment and think about this and evaluate it and see what's happening. As much as possible, have a growth mindset and often reframe things, and then remember to be grateful and acknowledge and look for grateful moments. That's sometimes helpful with self-care. And, sometimes limit the work talk when you're not at work. You may give yourself, for example, permission for like 15 minutes when you go home to talk about work, and then say, I'm done. And if you're working remotely, you may give yourself 15 minutes to think about work and then say, I'm done. And if you have a workspace, especially dedicated workspace off-site in your remote location, maintain that space as much as you can, and also shut that space down at the end of the day or on the weekends. If it's a space that you just need to kind of cover up with the blanket or something, sometimes just to not have that visual, that laptop sitting there, or put the laptop in a bag if there's a laptop you're working on. That's just something to do as well. All right. So here's as we start to wrap up, managing expectations, what do you control? Is something to think about. When you're managing expectations for yourself and for your colleagues or your supervisors, think about what you control. So you may want to, it may be helpful to just make a list of few things that you can do differently to make things better. If there's things that need to be improved, what are 2 or 3 things I can do to make it better? You might make a list of 1 thing you can do this week, 2 things you can do next week, maybe 2 to 3 things you can do within this month or this semester. So as we wrap up, I really want you to think and remind yourself that you can do this. You can do this. And it's okay to check in with yourself often. It's okay to check in with a colleague or a peer or supervisor often to see how things are going or to let them know if you're not doing okay. And some people find it helpful to have a mantra or encouraging phrase or a quote. Sometimes they may write that down and stick it on their monitor or put it in their laptop or write it in their phone. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can put it on as a like a little appointment at the top of your Outlook calendar as a reminder. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can encourage yourself. So definitely think about things that you can do to remind yourself that as you are working this hybrid schedule or this remote schedule, that you can do it. That you can do great things and nothing's outside of your reach. Here's a couple of examples. This one says, I accept that I can do a lot, but I cannot do everything. The second example says, I can do anything I put my mind to. And this the third example says, one day at a time. So I ask that you remember that flexible work schedules and healthy boundaries can help you to effectively manage your work and your life responsibilities. Good luck as you navigate working a hybrid and a remote work schedule.